Hi y'all, welcome to the second floor of the George H.W. Bush Gallery here at the National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas. We're here today with some co-workers of mine. I've got John Davies and Aaron Verinder, and we're going to walk through the process that we undertake to clean these weapons up and in the process show you all how we preserve some of these weapons from World War II. We've got Thompson submachine guns here. We've got a carbine, a 1911 pistol, a Japanese Nambu, a Japanese Arisaka, and an M1 Garand. Aaron, which one of these do you think we ought to show the viewers the process that we're going to go through today?
Well, the first rifle we're going to use is going to be the M1 Garand.
All right.
I'll pass that off to John. John is going to be our disassembly guy. He's going to take her down and get her ready to be put in the sonic cleaner.
All right. Well, let's have a look at that.
So here we are at step one of the cleaning process of an M1 Garand. So we do the disassembly on this particular table. On the Garand, we're going to start the disassembly, and step one is to remove the trigger guard and assembly. Then we remove the stock. And since this is a blank adapted firearm, we're going to remove the blank adapter from the barrel so we can access the bore to clear any obstructions that we have within that barrel.
Listen to the sound of all that grit and grime in there. Look at that. This is one of the reasons why we find it important to clean these weapons, because sometimes they get a bunch of beach sand and grit from our living history amphitheater in the mechanisms, and it's important to clean all that debris out.
That is the guide rod spring that was removed. Now he's removing the magazine, the clip ejector, and spring assembly. Now the guide rod is being removed as you hear the grind of the rocks that are within this weapon, which is detrimental to its operation. And this weapon gets particularly dirty because they run onto a beachhead, and when they jump into the sand gets all inside the weapon. The reason why you see it in the movies, they have plastic bags around their weapons as they come onto the beach to keep this from happening. Now he's removing the bolt and bolt assembly. That's what houses the firing pin. That amount of grind will inhibit the operation of that weapon. We're going to move the upper barrel shroud. Notice the grime is heavily embedded in this weapon. At the rear of the receiver, you can see a large amount of rocks, which would be detrimental to the operation of that weapon as well. Now, the next step before we put the weapon into the sonic cleaner, we're going to punch the bore and remove any obstructions, rocks, and loosen up the carbon which is baked in from the blanks in the barrel before it goes into the sonic cleaner. You can hear the bore brush grinding into what's inside that barrel, rocks and all. Now we're going to run some patches through, push all the grime out. Well, the blank ammunition that runs through these weapons, it creates high heat and a lot of carbon. So basically, gunpowder is basically fertilizer, and it's burning through the barrel and increasing the heat temperature in it. But the blank adapter holds the heat at the tip, and it has very little escapes. So it's basically like a blowtorch going through that barrel, and that causes a lot of damage to the bore. So by removing the excess carbon that's created by the blanks, we'll extend the longevity of this rifle. So you keep running until your patches become lightly dirty instead of extremely dark, because the sonic cleaner will finish off the rest.
Next, we insert all of the metal parts into our basket, and we're going to put the basket into the sonic cleaner. Thanks, John. I like to keep some separation between my metal parts, that way they get thoroughly cleaned. And I've got some smaller baskets to hold some of the smaller parts so they don't get, because sometimes some of these parts can slip through the mesh in the bigger basket, like some of these pins. They'll go into my small baskets, and I'll hang my small baskets on the side of the large basket. I got to make sure and get all these parts. Well, Aaron, it's time to give these a bath. Have we got our sonic cleaner heated up proper?
Yes, we do.
What all do we have in there?
What we have in here is distilled water with a solvent.
Why are we using distilled water?
Well, distilled water is demineralized, so that helps the process of cleaning, because if it was tap water, all the minerals will stick to the metal and your gun will be chalky white when it comes out in some spots.
All right.
So the overall process is to remove the grime and the carbon, because these are blank adapted weapons. So we're going to turn this blue lagoon into a black lagoon.
All right. Well,
you'll see all the carbon within it.
Let's give it a bath.
Okay, let's go.
Help me out on that.
Yep.
Small basket there. All right. Everything submerged.
Yep.
All right.
And if you want, you can start the process, and you can see the bubbles coming off of the weapon itself.
All right. And this will run for 20 minutes.
Yep.
You can see it's already active.
Yep. You can see the bubbles coming off of everything. So what happens is it's going in there and it's vibrating this system, and it's pulling everything out of the porous parts of the metal.
Let's take a break and come back to this.
For 20 minutes.
I'll show you what happens next. Aaron, I think this one's done cooking.
All right, let's take her out.
Oh, look at all that oil and grime on top of the water there. Look at there.
Yep. So ready? Oh.
That's hot.
Nice and hot.
That's hot.
And you can see the water evaporating because the steel is at a certain temperature.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And it just evaporates right off. But once you do that, that's why it has to go into the oiler preservation.
It can soak in that oil better.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll let this drip dry for a little bit before we dump it into the oil.
Okay.
All right. This is a butt plate of an M1 Garand that needs to get treated for rust. So I've got a basket here, and I can just drop my part into the basket, submerge the part into the solution, and leave it overnight. When I bring it out, the rust will be gone. You can see the remnants of rust in my solution here. That's why it looks as bad as it does. This solution will not only take off all of the rust, but it also removes the bluing. So when it comes out of the rust solution, we need to take it over to the bluing station.
When we get a component that had rust removed, and that usually removes the bluing itself. So for the process that we use to replace the bluing is a cold brew process. It's a lot more rapid, and it also kind of gives the patina look, so it doesn't make it too brand new. So I'm using triple aught steel wool to lighten the surface up a little bit. And then I'm going to acetone it. You can see what's coming off. All right, now we got a clean surface, nice and grimy. And then on the cold bluing option, and once I put this on, you'll start seeing the conversion immediately. So you can see it turn blue just like that. And you just do stripes. The purpose for the bluing is we're replacing the bluing that had came off in the rust removal process, and so we're trying to bring it back to its original state. And the bluing is a it preserves the metal. And you let that sit for 60 seconds, and then I clean it off, and I do it again for 6 more times. It goes from there to the oiler, and what the oil does is it locks in the preservative on the bling process, and then overnight it basically locks in, keeps the moisture out, and it'll convert overnight and give you a deeper coat, a deeper color.
All right, I think this is sufficiently dry and cool. Now, what do we got here, Aaron?
So what we have here is the oil bath.
What do we use in there?
Well, the particular oil that we use is it's a extreme duty high heat, so it flash points up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So that'll allow us, a good safety, so we don't have,
Good margin of
more
safety.
safety. So,
all right.
And it's a very good oil.
So what we'll do is we'll just transfer metal parts to the other basket.
All right. As you can see, I can touch it. No, it's not too hot.
Again, it's nice to place these things into the basket so that they don't touch one another, so that the oil can get onto all of the parts.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are going to install the basket in the oil. And you can grab that side, I'll grab this side.
Yeah. Ready?
Yep.
All right, and we'll leave it in this oil bath for another 20 minutes. Oh, knock that down.
Yep, there we go.
Everything's submerged.
Submerged.
All right. So this is another sonic cleaner, but we're not going to turn the heat on, but we will turn the vibrations on so that the oil can penetrate into the metal as best it can. So we're gonna run this one right quick. Aaron, looks like this one's done.
All right.
Let me get this lid put away.
All right. I'll go my end, your end.
All right.
Tell me when you're ready. Ready?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Ready?
Up. Yeah, get it to where it'll drain.
We're just going to let the excess oil drip off of it back into the bath so as to not, this oil is expensive. So we want to keep as much of it for these guns as possible instead of soaking it into our absorbent mats. So we'll just stand all these parts up, let them kind of drip dry for a little bit, get that excess oil off of them. And then we'll leave it for a while, let it really soak in and dry out before we reassemble it. See, it's full of oil. There. And we'll leave that for a little while. Let it drip dry. All right, our parts have dripped enough to set them now on the drying rack, and what we're going to do is let them drip dry and absorb overnight, and then we'll reassemble it tomorrow. But we have one gun per shelf, that way we don't get our parts mixed up. We've got plenty of drying racks. And my small parts too.
Now we're at the final step of assembly. Now that we have disassembled, cleaned, oiled, and dried the firearm, now we got to put it back together. So the first component I'm going to put in, well, we've already added the magazine lifter. So we're going to put the bolt in. And this is the toughest process because you got to get it like a puzzle piece. So when you're a kid putting the star peg in the star hole, this will prepare you for putting M1 Garands back together. Hopefully. And voila, just like that. So we got the bolt in. Now we're going to add the wood components on the top. And make sure everything mates up, matches up. Oh, looks like, there we go. Good fit. Wood comes on. Locks in. Then we're going to put the sight structure in. Locking lug. Spin it as far as you can get it, and then back off. Then we install the gas piston gas adjustment. Tighten it in pretty good. Then we're going to put our guide rod in. Oops. Now this is another ambidextrous part where you got to put the bolt and line it up in a slot, and then it grabs the bolt right there on its face. So there you go. So you kind of test it out, keep that magazine follower out of the way. Okay, we're in good shape. Now we can install the spring. Spring goes in. This is a tricky part. You got to line up this component to these little notches, and sometimes the spring lets go out of your hand and it flies across the room. And usually if somebody's downrange, they might get poked with this thing. And there you go. So now we've got the upper part assembled and ready to go. So now we got to put it on the buttstock, which is a pretty good, simple process. You tie the key in, slide it down, locks into place, make sure it's nice and rigid. And then we install the trigger group. And there's grooves in here that you line these grooves onto. Well, and now you're locked in. Then you do a function test. Pull back the bolt, make sure everything locks, let it go, pull the trigger, let it go again, and you hear a clunk. So this gun is ready to operate, go back into service, or go into storage for further use or display.
Well, Aaron, clearly, soldiers in the field couldn't go through any of that process. So who do you think had it a little easier in the field cleaning these weapons? The Japanese or the Americans?
At the beginning of the war, I would say the Japanese had it easier. A lot of their weapons were pretty simple, designed well by Nambu. He redesigned everything for Manchuria, so they already had a theater of battle prior to World War II fighting the Americans. So they worked all the bugs out of their weaponry. So they made it easier for the troops in the field to utilize their weapons and clean them at a fast pace.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've received some questions from some of the audience, and we'd like to get into those right now. Sarah was asking if we have any special techniques or for keeping the wood in good shape. A lot of times that the wood is separated from the metal is treated, and in the process, some of that oil does get onto the wood, and that helps, I think, protect the wood a little bit. But how else could we treat some of that wood, Aaron?
Well, the wood takes a beating, especially with the EOC weapons, education weapons. They get chips, dents, just like real-time battlefield wounds. So to treat the wood, if we have a fracture, we used to use basic wood glue, press it, dry it overnight, put it back into service.
If there's major dents, you actually steam it out. It's a process. You can use an iron or just a steamer, and it sucks the dent out. For treatment, you can use linseed oil or any other type of oil based wood preservative. I prefer Murphy's oil soap. Scrub them down and get all the dirt and grime off of them, and then just wipe them down.
Some of those parts appear to be wood, but they're Bakelite.
Right.
Any special treatment on any of the Bakelite parts?
On the Bakelite, it's if it's not brittle and fracturing and crumbling on you, I usually just wipe it down, clean all the oil off of it, and keep it dry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got another question here. Catherine would like to know if these weapons are the ones used for demonstrations from the education collection, or are they the ones that are in the permanent collection? We're actually treating both. The ones that we demonstrated earlier today, that one was for education purposes that we use in some of the reenactments and some of the living history programs, and they're blank adapted, and we do fire them. And we end up treating all of those, we clean all of those weapons in a similar way, but we're also doing the weapons in the permanent collection in the same way. And in the weapons from the permanent collection, they'll get broken down, treated for rust, blued if any of the parts need to be blued, they'll get cold blued, and then they'll be sonic cleaned and dipped into the oil, reassembled, and put back into permanent storage where we can either display them or what have you. So we're doing both sets of weapons, education weapons and the ones in the permanent collection. This leads to another question. Sarah would like to know how many of these weapons are treated this way in a year. Aaron, I'll let you let you answer that one.
They get depending on how many shows and they get treated that way 4 times a year, definitely. Depending on use, if it's a machine gun and there's a lot of carbon on it, I definitely run it through the cleaner. Those 50s, the Thompsons, they get run through the cleaner every time they get used because the amount of carbon gets put through them. And I have to heavily inspect the machine guns because they do have a lot of moving parts. And if you get damage from the blanks, I got to make sure it doesn't have a massive failure on the battlefield.
And the weapons in the permanent collection, the goal is to get each one of the weapons in the permanent collection treated and then placed back in storage. And oh gosh, you've seen the collection, Aaron. What do you think where we are in percentage wise? Maybe
we got a while ago.
33%.
Yeah,
we've got about a third of the way through the permanent.
We still
collection.
Have the hardest part is the air sockets.
Yeah, we've got a lot of air sockets to break down and treat. Yeah. So, but one and done, and that's how we're preserving these things in the permanent collection. Ventilation. There's a question about, do we need to worry about ventilation during the cleaning process? We're in a fairly well ventilated area to begin with, but when working with solvents and cleaning solutions and things like that, it's always a good idea to be well ventilated. Ooh. Okay, here's another one. Which weapon is the hardest to clean and which is the easiest?
I would say the 50 cal is the hardest because of the weight.
Yeah,
it's a heavy gun, and
it seems to want to stomp the baskets.
Yeah, you're going to the gym when you're working on that gun, so you're definitely putting a lot of.
And it doesn't want to fit in the basket.
No, it has a lot of surface area, so there's a lot to clean.
It doesn't want to go underwater.
It's the dirtiest weapon too. So I shoot 50 rounds of 50 caliber blanks. That thing you're scrubbing for weeks.
What's the easiest one?
My favorite, the Nambu.
Oh yeah.
And thanks to the Czechoslovakians with their basic design, the bolt and carrier group comes right out the back. It slides right out. Barrel comes off with ease, and then you clean the guts. You put it back together. I can do that weapon. If I just need to do a field clean with a wipe down, I could do it in about 5 minutes.
Oh,
And-
that one is pretty easy.
Yeah, in the shop, if you hand clean it, it's about a 30 minute to an hour job.
Here's Rhonda would like to know where we can get the bluing solution that we used.
If
Where,
you-
where did we get that?
Well, we got the bluing from our local Ace Hardware. It's birchwood. If you really want a good price on some bluing, there's bluing paste and there's bluing liquid. The paste I highly recommend. It's easier to work with. You can get that on Amazon for a really good price. Just type in gun bluing and you'll have a smorgasbord of different types that you can pick from.
And acetone also is
Yeah, acetone is
easily
important.
available.
Yeah, fingernails.
Let's see. Do we have any more questions here? All right, I think that's going to wrap us up for some of our questions and answers here. We'd like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and don't forget to tune in on July 19th when we've got our next webinar, which is entitled A Hidden Treasure Preserved. FRUPAC maps from the Pacific War. These are maps, daily maps that were compiled by the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific in Oahu during the war. We're having those preserved and digitized. So tune in next month for a deeper dive into how that process goes and what that looks like. Thank you all for joining us today.